Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Christina Krishbaum. I'm the program manager for TNP. I'm going to be providing the background support for today's session, the virtual town hall, Connecting Arts Nonprofits with Senator Lena Gonzalez. And if you have any questions, please post them up in that Q&A chat. You can also, in the Q&A box, you can introduce yourself in the chat box as well. And if you need anything during the session, please feel free and message me in that chat box, or I will also post up my cell phone in case anybody has any questions or any issues. We will be following up this session with an email to everybody with some more information on this. And without further ado, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Port of Long Beach, for sponsoring this event today. And I'd like to hand things off to Executive Director of the Nonprofit Partnership, Michelle Barley. Michelle?
It's Christina. Welcome, everyone. Yes, continue to introduce yourself in the chat. If you did it early on, some newer attendees may not see that, so do that one more time. We are very excited for our town hall today with the Arts Council for Long Beach and Senator Lena Gonzalez. TNP and the Arts Council host an affinity group every other month for arts executive directors throughout the year. And this month, we are happy to welcome the senator and a much larger audience to that group. So we have a chance to be together, even if it's virtual, hear updates on the issues that are important to arts in the community, and also have a chance to connect with the senator. So again, the Q&A will be for questions. If you don't know where the Q&A box is, it's at the bottom of your screen, but you can always put it in the chat and we'll try to find it there as well. If we don't have time for the questions at the end, we'll do our best to answer those or share them with the senator's team to answer those as a follow-up. So I have the honor of introducing our moderator first for the morning. So welcome, Griselda. Griselda Suarez was born in unincorporated East LA and grew up in a place where her thoughts did not easily find a voice. Instead, she found pen and paper, and she believes that the arts, as most of us here on the call, are essential in empowering others to express their thoughts. Throughout her career, she's created programming and trainings dedicated to facilitating transformation and creating agency in her communities. She joined the wonderful, she was in Long Beach, but joined the wonderful Arts Council community in 2016 as the executive director, and currently serves as an advisor for LA County Board of Supervisors, Cultural Equity and Inclusion Initiative Council. She's also a professor at Cal State Long Beach, and we have had such a great partnership with Griselda and the Arts Council with TNP. She's a great advocate for the arts, artists, nonprofits, among other communities. And so thank you, Griselda, for being here today and moderating, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for all the work you've been doing since March. I know that you and your entire team are tireless advocates for nonprofits, and so it is an honor for the Arts Council to continue partnering with you. Today we have over 50 orgs joining us today, which is wonderful, which speaks to not only the need to learn more about what's happening within our state, but also the need to just connect, right? To know that other people are doing the work that you're doing, and we all stand with you. It is an absolute honor for me to introduce Senator Lena Gonzalez. One of the amazing things about Lena is that she is very forthright with her points of view, and one of the strongest points of view is she calls herself a STEMinist. That's STEM and feminist together, which I love. Prior to being in the California Senate, Lena Gonzalez was the Long Beach City Council member for District 1 from 2014 to 2019. She is currently focusing on creating jobs, promoting quality education, addressing homelessness, also talking about the digital divide, another area that she advocates for. She's on various committees at the Senate level, including the Senate Health Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, Transportation and Joint Legislative Audit, and chair of the Senate Select Committee on Ports and Goods and Movement. And there was one very special committee that came out of the pandemic, chair of the Special Committee on the Pandemic Emergency Response, which you will be giving us some updates on today. So welcome, Senator Gonzalez. I would love to begin just by asking you if you can share your journey with us on how you got to the Senate and what in this important election year made you want to get into serving as a public servant.
Thank you so much, Griselda, and thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate the town hall and everybody being very interested in connecting with us here at this morning. It's just really a great opportunity for us to just chat and talk about what's happening at the state. It's been a very challenging year. I often kind of joke very lightly with my staff about how I will never know what it's like to be a real senator. Because I came in last year, was sworn in June, and it just went really, really fast. I was in the middle of a $200 billion budget. And then now we're in the middle of a pandemic that is hurting a lot of Californians right now. But I got here obviously being a city council member representing the downtown and west and central areas of our city. Very, very much appreciative of that. It really battle tested me as to what was up to come in the state Senate. And I, alongside working on the city council, I also worked for Microsoft as a social responsibility manager, ensuring that young girls and boys, especially those of color, had access to technology and coding programs, and especially pushing young girls to be able to have that opportunity. So that's why I'm a self-described feminist. But I'm a mom of 3 boys as well. I raised them here in Long Beach with my husband, Adam, and we love our city, and I now have more to represent. I have the Southeast cities that are incredibly amazing, and the South Central LA portion of Florence Firestone as well. So a lot of great communities.
So I think one of the wonderful ways that you express and demonstrate to the community the strength of community is that you really believe in all economies, right? You just talked about digital economies. You talked about there are many committees that you are a part of in regards to the port and so on and so forth. But what about the creative economy? I know that that's always been something important for you.
It's always been important because even when I was in the city council and just having the opportunity to have local artists curate and have you and others curate my office for me and pay those artists and ensure that their work felt valued, I think was really important for me. I'm currently on the board of ICT as well. I love the work that they do, and especially their social responsibility lens and their equity lens. And I've gone to a lot of local performances because I just appreciate the arts so very much and everything that each of you do and bring value to our city. And so I want to continue supporting it anyway. And I hope that this conversation, I may not have all the answers, but I hope that this conversation is fruitful for everyone. And I hope you to know that when I'm in Sacramento, I'm certainly thinking about these conversations and ensuring how we can better legislation and or how we can create new legislation to improve your lives during this pandemic, especially.
Yes, ICT or International City Theater is one of our grantees. They do wonderful theater. The mural that I have behind me is at Washington Middle School. It was also one of the projects that we worked with you on with the brides. It's just a wonderful community-oriented and community process public art project. So, now that you are at the Senate level, I think the way you advocate for artists and the art sector changes just a little bit. Where in Long Beach, it was very much about the district and looking at these neighborhoods. Now you have a larger area. Let's first begin with any updates from the special committee on pandemic response. Why don't we start there in our conversation?
Absolutely, sure. And, I was appointed, the emergency order hit mid-March, as we all know. The legislature then had to go to recess because we weren't in session. So we went on recess for a few months. And then I was appointed chair in May. So early May, we had our very first, if you will, oversight hearing. And the purpose that the Senate created this pandemic assistance or pandemic emergency response committee was for the fact that we were out of session and the governor kept going on with his executive orders, and we appreciate that he certainly has the authority to do that, but we wanted to ensure we had say over those executive orders and that we also, as a legislature, even though we were home in our districts, had input as well. And so in May, we had our very first hearing, which included a discussion on testing, contact tracing, antibodies, and we brought in folks from the UCs and doctors up and down the state to just talk about what was happening with testing. We were still having turnaround times of 16 days, 14 days, how can we get better lab relationships, those types of discussions. The second discussion was on skilled nursing facilities. As we knew here in LA County and certainly in Long Beach, a lot of the skilled nursing facilities were hotspots, and a lot of our elderly family or friends and family members with disabilities were living in these hotspots. And we needed to find answers and a priority and a strategy for skilled nursing facilities. And then thirdly, we talked about the border region. As we knew, Imperial County, which is primarily Latino, essential worker, we knew that there were very bad infrastructure with health infrastructure there in Imperial County, and we needed to help that county and their public health officials. So we brought light to many of the issues happening there. We're starting to host a whole slew of new oversight hearings, even though we're out of session. So last week, I went back up to Sacramento and we discussed the essential workforce, primarily focusing on grocery workers, warehouse workers. We focused on RNs in our hospitals, CNAs in our skilled nursing facilities, because their voice needed to be lifted up as we knew that they were being positively tested. We know that some of them don't still have PPE, et cetera, et cetera. So we lifted up those voices so we can think about policies in which we can start planning for next year in 2021. The next few months, we will start tackling reopening of schools to discuss distance learning and addressing inequities in our schools, especially as it pertains to kids with special needs, kids that are in high poverty areas. And then lastly, we'll go back to our prison system and figure out what we're doing there. It's a congregate facility that we know is also a major hotspot. And again, we don't really have a strategy for that. So it's been very eye-opening being part of this committee. And again, I look forward to suggestions. We have a consultant on my team. Her name is Janice. And we really look forward to just inciting more ideas and inspiration for this committee as we head into 2021.
You mentioned PPE, and that is definitely something that many organizations in the first few months of the pandemic struggled to get. And even now when we're, when the dust is kind of settling, but we're still realizing that as we want to serve many of our customers and clients, we will need PPE. Is there something, is your office dealing with PPE and helping in any way, shape, or form with that?
We are. I mean, a lot of us in our Senate offices or assembly offices have just been working sort of ad hoc with, for instance, like the BizFed Institute to be able to provide PPE to essential workers or to anyone who really asks us. And so the BizFed Institute is one place where we've just sort of been working on the side. I know that if there are holes that we need to fill in, for instance, for this community, the art community, we always, I have a direct line of communication to Cal OES, so our emergency contacts. And, a lot of the issue had been, just to kind of go back a little bit, is a lot of the state had secured some PPE and some of that had even been seized by the federal government. And so that took up a lot of our PPE that we had, obtained. And then we tried to create a domestic supply chain. So using, our California born native businesses like 3M and Honeywell. Unfortunately, we were also, as a state, competing with other states. And so we didn't get prioritization, even being from California, which is unfortunate. So we've got a lot still that we need to manage as it pertains to PPE, but there are a few state laws that have been put in place that will hopefully loosen that and provide more avenues and spur some more innovation from our businesses. Like, for instance, Virgin Orbit in our backyard here in Long Beach are creating, I believe, PPE as well as ventilators. And we're just spurring that innovation. And that's what's really exciting. The only silver lining, I would say, through this pandemic is that you're seeing this great innovation happen within our communities.
And so if any of our organizations need support there or don't know where to go, they can reach out to your office?
Yes, please contact our office. We'll get you in touch. We have like a full-pronged approach as far as connecting with all of the entities that we need to, county, state, and then the ad hoc sort of side project we're doing as well.
Great, thank you. So I don't know if unemployment benefits are part of your special committee, but one of the things that came out of pandemic response was providing some relief, some contractor relief to many of our artists through the independent contractor program. Do you have any updates on that program and if there will be any renewed relief?
That's a great question. And, we in the state of California, through the federal government, we were still borrowing money for unemployment. And in fact, there's a hearing going on now about that. So But I chose to be here with you all because we've got my colleague, Senator Jerry Hill, that's handling the labor. He's the chair of Labor Committee. And so that is going on now, but we can always record it and ensure that you all can see what is happening. But we've held various committee hearings on this issue. We've talked to the administration almost on a weekly basis about unemployment insurance, specifically as it pertains to pandemic unemployment insurance, which was specifically for independent contractors, freelancers, small businesses. That was enacted end of April. And so that was great relief for folks that traditionally wouldn't be eligible in the state of California for unemployment. Now, do we know what's going to happen next? I don't unfortunately know. We've been talking, of course, with our federal partners to see if there can be more relief. I think, quite honestly, everyone's sort of waiting for what happens with this election. I know that after November, we hopefully will see more relief come down, but we are constantly working with the federal government. I know our governor is doing that, as well as the administration to ensure that we provide relief, because unfortunately we're still in the first phase of this pandemic. And so we don't know when. I wish we had a crystal ball to be able to say a specific end date for this egregious pandemic, but we don't. But in the meantime, please let us know if there's any stalls with your unemployment. We also handle that. We have liaisons, legislative liaisons that work with us to get things moved along a lot faster for you.
Before we go on to one popular topic for a lot of arts organizations, which is AB 5, and several folks have included questions about AB 5, I want to just move to the California Arts Council. And if you know any funding updates on CAC, many
Yes.
of the grantees of that of the state agency. So we just wanted to make sure to cover that topic.
Absolutely, and that I do have one. We have it looks like as you know, I just want to kind of back up here. Our state budget has been very, very bad, unfortunately. I think the projections are about $54 billion in a deficit. And that may be worse or better. We haven't gotten a clear update because there were people that were still paying their income and payroll taxes, but also their property taxes very late. So we may get an update soon. Hopefully it looks better, but at the end of the day, we're in a deep, deep deficit. But with that said, I know that funding for the arts was protected through the 2021 budget. And it maintains the funds of the $26 million that was earmarked for the arts community, which is good. So that wasn't touched. There was nothing taken off or shaved off of that. And there's another point that my staff and I wanted to ensure you knew is that the California Relief Fund for Artists and Cultural Practitioners program was created by the California Arts Council, which basically wanted to help artists with impending financial needs given this pandemic and crisis, which I think was wonderful. The governor and the administration worked with a lot of us in the legislature to enact many of these, again, sort of ad hoc side programs to provide support for the communities. Like we did one for the undocumented community as well as our artists. So a total of $920,000 of the council state grants funds were awarded through the program, which offers unrestricted $1,000 rapid relief grants. That went through August 18th. And then everyone should have received notification if they did apply through September 1st. If you have questions on that, again, we're happy to help to find out where you're at in the process. And a list of the programs, the grant programs are at arts.ca.gov/programs. So if there's any questions about that, please let us know. Ariana Midell and our team would be the best contact, and we'll make sure you have her email as well.
Oh, great. That's really good news. And I know that artists need all the relief they can get. We also have some artists with us today. And so through CARES funding, a lot of our orgs have received some relief, but also many of our artists and musicians and performers, are independent, may have jobs, but also their music or their art is what subsidizes their maybe part-time job, right? There's many different ways that artists classify themselves. So that close to $1 million in artist relief is just amazing. And that program is going to continue. I know that next November, for many of us, it's California Arts Council grant season. It launches in November, and on October 29th, CAC will be having a RES equity workshop. It is now part of the new application to include a racial equity statement from the organizations and artists that are applying. So I know Christina will share that with everyone in the chat. So let's dive in a little bit more to AB5.
Really quick, Griselda, there's a question about funding, so I think I'll just pop it in now, related. And for you, Senator, or Griselda, if you have an answer, this is from the Historical Society. And the question is if there are efforts to provide relief funds for humanities-based institutions that may not have access to the other arts-based funding for operations, because we know that there's other types of funding locally and county and state level, but not necessarily for those humanities agencies.
Right, so like Cal Humanities or National Humanities.
I'm not certain off the top of my head. We can certainly look into that for you, but that's a great question. And I think Ariana is on the call as well. So if she wants to look that up and see if there is anything now, we'd be happy to share that with you. Thank you for the question though.
And also at the federal level, Senator, I think you're right about everything is on hold because of the national election and how it impacts. But there is a new relief for arts and humanities coming into the House and hopefully Senate. So there is a proposal to include humanities on the federal level, but a lot of it has to do with where we are in November, right? So hopefully that can go through and provide some much needed support to our humanities and cultural organizations.
Absolutely. And I know that's wonderful to hear. And I hope that we can continue sustaining the funding through the next few years, regardless of what happens, and that we just sort of earmark that for the arts. But yeah, that's wonderful.
So with AB5, the arts community in general started 2020 with the news of these changes that we knew were happening, but we did not know how great of an impact and how restrictive it was going to be in the end, right? And so many of us struggled with the independent contractor category because so many of the smaller gig economy within the arts, because I mean, the gig economy comes from the arts term, from the music term, our dance companies particularly were hit hard because dancers have always within their own structures been independent contractors. And then the pandemic, and so it was really difficult on many levels. But I know that you have, since the beginning, been listening to a lot of our concerns, and there's some changes that have happened with AB5, and I'm wondering if you could bring us up to speed and seeing how we can, what we can learn from these changes.
Absolutely. And again, I just want to say thanks so much for the opportunity to discuss. I know that so many things hit right away, and then the pandemic hit. And so things either make sense or don't make sense. And I just want to ensure that we sort of clear that up to ensure that we are on the same page. And if you have additional questions, again, we can add those in the chat, or you can always contact my office. We're happy to do that. Well, I guess we'll start, obviously AB5 came about, and I just want to ensure where there's additional context with this. I think it's a common misnomer that AB5 was just for the rideshare, the Ubers and Lyfts of the world. And yes, I think that's where it kind of sparked, because we saw inequities there with many of the drivers being misclassified, just as we've seen in our ports, a lot of the truck drivers that have been misclassified. The courts, as you know, had seen numerous complaints filed by employees about their employer, numerous complaints. And so that's why the Dynamex decision came about, was to really look at the industrial wage claim process and ensure that they were applying a common law employment standard to this specific issue. Now, AB5, what it did, of course, is it expanded that test to other labor code, well, all of the labor code really, which includes, of course, unemployment claims and other sort of breaks and labor issues, and a range of duties, of course, as many of you know. And so the decision created, of course, the ABC test. I know everybody uses the Borello test, which is 11 factors, and it's kind of ambiguous and vague and not really, it could be subjective. And so there are a lot of different opinions and a lot of different thoughts on how that could be applied. So when the Borrello test was put forward through the Supreme Court, it just created even more litigation. So that's why the ABC test was created, to make a more clear standard and just have 3 points that you could look at. And that still is being debated now, as we can see. So that's why we're going to have these discussions, and I look forward to hearing more from you. But I think the most important thing, and why this was put forward, and why we have the situation we have now, is that we know that misclassification of workers has been a longstanding issue for the state of California. And in fact, we've seen this even now with the cost to our general fund, which the state relies to fund every major public service. So we have, I think, estimated about $7 billion a year that has been expended by the state of California in paying out unemployment insurance claims, all of these other public services. And so especially so in the middle of a pandemic. So we're happy that some folks have been now classified as employees, and they're not misclassified anymore, given that we're in this pandemic and they do have financial support. But there's still a lot of uncertainty. And so the follow-up legislation that came about was, and sorry, just to go back, AB 5 also included exemptions for a few different folks, right? So exemptions for specific occupations like photographers, freelancers, writers. You had to be able to determine your own rates and hours, of course, real estate licensees, business-to-business contracting. So you have to be free from control of the business, and certain relationships between referral services and motor clubs. And so because of a lot of the discussion of what had been happening within the arts community, Assembly member, and I always want to make the distinction, Assembly member Lena Gonzalez, often people get us confused. Assembly member Gonzalez, she authored urgency legislation, which was AB 2257, which goes in immediately, and it clarifies the application of the Supreme Court's decision and AB 5, especially as it relates to performers who present their own original work. They're not subject to the ABC test because these performers have complete control over their creative process. It's clear that they're not subject to control and direction from an employer. And it's often where I think the conflict lies, because again, that could be misconstrued either way. And we'll talk about that. And so again, if an employer has the ability to control or direct the manner and means by which the individual performs their, say, theatrical performance, or dancers or actors, et cetera, they are likely to be held as employees, even under the old standard. So that's currently what is sort of the main thought in common law, both in the Borrello and the ABC test. But prior to the pandemic, Assemblymember Gonzalez was leading an effort to also provide $20 million in more funding for California Arts Council. And because of the pandemic, unfortunately, we couldn't get that through given our budget. But she's also working on creative solutions. And so I want to hear thoughts about this. I'm just providing the information that she's provided to us, and I want to ensure that we provide even more details to her about what we could do to better this situation for artists. She'll basically, there's one substantial savings that could be achieved by establishing a state or regional nonprofit services organization to act as an employee administrator. So for instance, an employee administrator hub for small theaters could possibly be an option. It's a cooperative model, and it means that theaters could realize an economy of scale. The service organizations could deepen their relationships with local theaters, and the state would facilitate the receipt of additional revenue for this unemployment pool, if you will, through this cooperative. And this model could also later be expanded to other common needs for additional savings, such as accounting, bookkeeping, to help small nonprofit theaters and nonprofit art groups, as well as the need to file 990 forms, et cetera. So all of that technical support could potentially be supported through this as well. The second suggestion that she has been put out there, and this is through her accumulation of many discussions that have happened with our office, with her office, and with many who've been involved in AB 5 and trying to figure out a solution for the arts community. State and local art agencies would have completely different application processes and timelines, making it difficult for smaller organizations looking to grow need to reapply for the same pool of funds each year, which creates a bottleneck for growth, as we know. So the state can consider creating a series of program and operational grants in state and local agencies with 3 and 5 year windows, which would be great. It could provide stability and allow organizations to strengthen their fundraising by planning for further in the future. So the $20 million, I believe that she was going to apply for that, although we couldn't get that through this year, given the budget. I think planning ahead now and looking at the 3 or 5 year strategy horizon for the Arts Council, for arts, the California Arts Council, and ensuring that gets down to the local level, I think could be very helpful as well in kind of getting everyone used to the law. And then finally, needing to look at proposals that fund the arts. As you know, we're ranked 28th in arts funding per capita. And in 2019, the governor and legislature made important progress with the announcement in 2019 that he would also add $10 million in arts funding. So we got to hold him to that, I hope. In addition to the 20 million that had previously been thought about. So pushing for additional funding, of course, will be critical to help these small nonprofit arts organizations reopen. And so, especially again in this era. So I think, again, creating a cooperative of sorts with help from the state, looking at the 3-5 year horizon with the opportunity to have a little bit more flexible timelines and processes. And then thirdly, just helping with additional funding, the 20 million plus additional 10 million, coming up with a really great line item in addition to the funding that the California Arts Council already has to be able to help specifically with AB 5, AB 2257 implementation. So I hope that was clear, but happy to take any questions about that. And I know that there are a few webinars that will be coming up, and specifically Assemblymember Gonzalez will also have one specific with the California for Arts. It's a webinar to follow up on the 2257 and just the AB5 impacts, and again, receive more input and ideas. And that will be at californiaforthearts.org. We will get the date for you. So I'm going to ask what that date is from Ariana, but thank you.
Yes, no, thank you so much for this update. And so just so that we're clear,
Yeah.
and love if you can repeat. So within AB5, there were some exceptions within AB5, and that included, you said, photographers and writers. Correct?
Yes.
So, okay. And then we had discussed if maybe even there was fine arts, if there was a fine arts definition within AB5 and what that meant. Because I know within other scopes within the state legislature, fine arts is it defined, but it wasn't really defined in AB5.
No.
Right? And so then where can we find maybe the other exemptions within AB5? Is there somewhere you can direct us to? And then within AB 2257, you're saying that performers of original work are, that's their carve out for them, a little exemption for them?
Yes, so it has to be their original work. So it can't be the work of the theater directing them to perform. It has to be their original work that they do. And so, but again, there's lots of questions about that we've heard about, and some of the art could be mixed in. There's a lot of different nuances to that. So again, I'd love to hear what those might be, so we can certainly bubble those up and start discussing those on a greater level. But yes, AT 2257 was an urgency, so it's already in effect. It was signed by the governor right away, but just specifying that original work piece for the most part.
Okay. So yeah, let's get to some questions and see if we can continue the dialogue here.
Yeah, and one of the questions is, I think you somewhat asked it just now, Griselda, but are there any communication materials available that we can send out or share or direct them to a website about all of the different carve-outs of the new, just all of the information that arts organizations and independent artists could use to clarify the recent changes?
Yes, in fact, I will get that sent over to you right now, and I'll see if I can add that to the chat as well. So let me see if we can do that.
And we can always follow up with all of the attendees after with these resources too. So no pressure. Or if you say it out loud, someone magically might type it in from TNP. And then let's see, there was a few other, there are some questions that are somewhat suggestions to AB5. And I know you said you're
Great.
open to hearing some of those solutions.
Absolutely.
So some of those are around different things like workers' compensation rates or different things that are cost prohibitive to artists. We did hear you say that they're working on building an infrastructure, but not necessarily changing any of the actual costs associated. So we can share those with you after the fact.
That would be great.
Yeah, we'll make sure to share all of these suggestions. So if you have more suggestions out there for the audience, you can add those in there as well.
And I think the cooperative pool would hopefully help alleviate much of those costs. Again, a lot of the details would have to be kind of figured out through the California Arts Council, but as it pertains to, the technical workers' compensation pool, that could be also put in there. And then, of course, those dollars that could be then put into the unemployment insurance. So there isn't a disconnect with no unemployment or no payments into the entitlement program that would not be paid, essentially.
And one of the questions seems right now theoretical because that $20 million didn't make it into the budget, but it's about that additional funding. What measures may be in place to ensure that organizations who may receive those funding to pay artists as employees don't take those funds and then not pay their artists as employees? So is there a plan for that once the funding makes it into the budget?
That's another great question. Again, we're still in the preliminary stages, so this has to be a well thought out process. The $20 million, we do want to ensure that it goes towards exactly what we intended, which was ensuring that employees were supported and that it did go towards, the unemployment claims and workers' compensation pool, et cetera. But again, a lot of what we may be doing is borrowing from the federal government from this, to be quite honest with you. Again, given our state budget at $54 billion in a deficit, and again, we're trying to figure out if that's better or worse, depending on the election as well and who works with us. We may have to ask maybe a new administration for this Arts Council funding, which might be good, might be bad, we don't know. So we're going to have to do a lot of work, and I think it'd be important, I should say, and we'll kind of find an avenue for you, not just at the state level to be advocating, but also to ensure that we're advocating at the federal level, even now, to start discussing, to start putting the feelers out so we know after this election, whatever might happen, that we do have some sort of opportunity for that $20 million, and or continuing to work with the administration as well. Of course, at the state level, there's always pots of money that are miraculously found. I've learned that at the city level and at the state level. And if we apply the pressure and the advocacy and we do so in a way that makes sense and is meaningful, which this is very meaningful, then there, could be additional dollars expended. And it could be even an ask, from a legislator that, or a letter from multiple legislators advising the administration to earmark these dollars in our next budget.
Thank you. Speaking of elections, does Prop 22 have any impact on AB5?
Yeah, it does. So this would essentially reverse AB5. You think of Prop 22, it would. I think obviously you see a lot of and not to get too much into it because I am on state time, but it would essentially repeal AB5. And so you see a lot of Uber and Lyft, it's focused a lot on the rideshare component. But I think this would have, deep consequences for us. And there's not this arts community, but there are corporations that should be paying their fair share, especially if they've been employing a lot of folks without paying them properly. There should be distinctions, right, with each industry.
Thanks. And then we have some other questions around some of the California arts funding and different areas like that we can move into. But one question is on advocacy. So you mentioned that the governor had committed to funding arts, and we know there's this planned arts funding. Who would these organizations reach out specifically to help to advocate for keeping that money in the budget, or making sure that money gets down to the arts organizations?
Yes, great question. And I know, of course, you can always advocate with our office. We are happy. I mean, I'm not on a committee pertaining to the arts specifically, but we absolutely will always support, and again, writing letters, et cetera, and continuing the advocacy at the state and federal levels for you. But I know that, for instance, I think Assemblymember Laura Friedman on the Assembly side is on the arts. I believe she chairs the arts committee. I think on our side, I don't know that we have a specific committee or that it has been very active, but I know that committees are going to be changing in this after the election. And so I may not even have the health committee or the judiciary anymore. I may be, put on another committee. So after the election, I would say let's update and reconvene so you know exactly who's on which committee. So it'd be really great for you to connect with them and ensure that you're advocating at that particular committee. And then also there's nothing to preclude you from writing a letter to the governor as well. And I always tell people, do it. Some of our Southeast cities, I don't know if I should write a city. Yes, please write a letter, because it only helps the legislature, especially if for any reason we are out of session and the governor is creating these executive orders that kind of go back and forth. And we're like, wait, why is $10 million being spent there, but not in the arts community? But as long as we get that letter, we can also help push. So governor, the legislature, committees, and if we can get a specific person in the governor's office that would be focused on this, we'll be happy to share that as well.
Great. Thank you. Moving a little bit in between the two topics of pandemic and California Arts Council, there was a relief fund for cultural workers, and the comment was that artists who were on unemployment insurance were ineligible to apply. So do you know if there's any plans to remove that, or they would suggest removing that in the future moving forward?
I know we have talked with a few legislators about that. Our unemployment system, the whole process is so antiquated. I mean, we haven't changed our unemployment rate since the 70s. And a lot of what we do is it's either or. And I'm like, no, people actually need both in many cases, because of just, again, first phase of this pandemic, we have no idea when this is going to end, and people need their financial support now, yesterday. So yes, we're looking at those sort of nuances where we can support folks, both on unemployment and on top of that, this additional relief. We're also looking at housing relief and how we can get dollars in the hands of folks right away and not have to go through hurdles and, all of that. So I think we've had those conversations. It didn't end as well as we wanted to, again, given the budget, but I think next year we're a little bit more prepared to know, and again, with a new election and a new administration, where we need to pivot in asking the federal government for relief directly, and then also fixing some of our state sort of rules around relief. I know we also had iBank, which I believe some artists could apply for. It was for a small business, specifically like women and minority-owned businesses. They gave grants upwards of, I believe, $10,000 to $50,000. And so those are available as well. If some folks want to apply, it's ibank.ca.gov, I believe. And those were also for folks that were undocumented too, which was good. So we're learning from this process on how to provide relief in a better manner and for folks that really need it.
Great. I want to get to different questions in different areas because we have potentially about 10 minutes left. So in regards to the safer at home orders and the pandemic, when can we expect change to the orders regarding museums and galleries? We know that there's social distancing, masks, controlling the number of visitors, and they're not currently open for business. So when can we expect that? And is there any advocacy that nonprofits could do in that area as well?
That is a great question. And quite honestly, I have been I'm just going to be real transparent here. I've been a little frustrated with the process, I'm sure as you all have, because why are the Targets and the Nordstroms open? Well, especially like Nordstrom, I don't know that is essential. Especially it's been open since day one. But people need outlets, even during this pandemic. And I think for some folks, even myself, museums and galleries are a way to have an outlet. And so I think the best thing would be to write a letter. I am the chair of the pandemic committee. And so I would love to have a letter from each and every one of you and do this campaign on how we can and when we can open museums and galleries, because every single time we've connected with the administration and we meet with them twice a month, if not, more regularly. Every time we have, they've loosened regulations and they've seen, what the possibilities could be, like nail salons and breweries. But we also have to engage, the Los Angeles County as well. And I believe Los Angeles, the data is trending in a better direction. We're plateauing a bit. Our ICUs and hospitalizations are going down. So we do have to depend on that data. But I think writing a letter to us and then us engaging with LA County as well as the state to be able to move into a less restrictive place for museums and galleries would be great. I think we're going to be moving to a less restrictive place anyway. So this is the perfect time to be able to do that.
Great. And I think this is a question, and if there's no answer, that's also fine. But are there any active conversations with philanthropy to support these statewide efforts to support arts organizations, or an effort that brings policy and funding together?
Yeah, that is a
policy
great
and philanthropy together.
Absolutely, that is a great, fantastic question, because yes, the Newsom administration has been in contact with a lot of their sort of network, corporations, mostly with the technology sector because of the distance learning issues. But I think as it pertains to the arts, we do have to start talking a bit more about how, if the federal government doesn't come through, how we can really lean on philanthropy to start helping us with a lot of this. Like, for instance, we worked with BizFed on PPE. There are other collaborations, public-private, that we can do to help the industry. So, I think that's wonderful. I think that's a discussion. There's a little bit different of nuances when it comes to the legislature. We have to often go through the Newsom administration through those, larger questions, because philanthropy for us, we have different reporting. For legislators, there's just all sorts of, controls that we have. But I think that's a great question that we should be, bubbling up even more, especially as, we're tapped out of financial resources at this time. So if there's any suggestions on folks we can reach out to, I know, again, he's got a lot of folks in his pocketbook that he's been talking to, but again, it's just been on distance learning. So I think we need to discuss that even more.
Great, thank you. And let's see, I'm going through some of these questions. This was a question around the California Arts Council recent funding. Are the funding opportunities that are being made available now that you spoke about, there's almost $1 million going straight to artists on top of what they usually grant. Is this on top of what is usually granted out, or is their total amount grants available less this year?
I believe this is on top of what has been already line itemed for them. So this is additional. And so again, I would hope that this continues next year, so we can have and even hopefully if we have philanthropy and even a larger pot of money to work with, that we do continue this on, and we continue with the advocacy. That's the most important thing. Again, both at the state and federal level. So we'll find out, since this one ended, we will find out when the next one will open up, and if there's going to be another, opportunity, different application periods, etc. And I'm sorry, I think my neighbor is like fixing his yard or something. So if you hear background noise, I apologize.
And I really do suggest that people register for the October 29th California Arts Council workshop. There will be a requirement for a racial equity statement in the application. So this is just the beginning of many technical assistance and also development workshops that they are providing. And, their line item in the budget did not change through through the pandemic. So they are reorganizing a lot of their categories. So it seems as if there are less grants available, but it's just that there's been a restructuring. And so as we learn more and we move forward into the grant application season next month, we will definitely be sharing more information through the Arts Council for Long Beach pages and through TNP.
And yeah, any funding information we have or the Arts Council shares, we also share out. So if you follow us all on social media, or you're on our email lists, then you should receive that information. And then there is a question, it's Long Beach specific, but recently Long Beach received funding through the CARES Act. Will any of those funds be shared with communities, parks, libraries? I'll just say there is a page on the city's website, and we can put that into the chat with what has been released. There are some nonprofit programs available right now that are in different areas depending on what you're doing as an organization, that are up on Planet Bids. So we'll share that information in the chat. And then I don't know if there's any updates, Griselda or Senator, that you have.
So within the Long Beach CARES program, there is a designation to arts organizations through the Arts Council. And so we received, the arts sector received 1.5 million. Much of the funds were dedicated by City Council. And so we do have a small grants program available through the Arts Council on CARES, that's dedicated CARES funds. I know Lisa from our team is on the call here. And so if Lisa, you can put the link up, that'd be great. We're working on an application that is for arts workers, artists, arts organizations, cultural organizations, and they will be part of our small grants program.
We all have so much faith and cannot do this without our teams. It's very clear. And so just a shout out to all of our teams.
Yes.
Thank you all for all of the support. I know we are getting to time. So Senator Gonzalez, I have a final question, but what are you looking forward to, or what are your hopes for the next year? Or you can even do shorter because, you know, the pandemic. What are your hopes for your work, and what are you looking forward to?
Well, of course, I mean, not just because I'm here, but I absolutely understand what the impacts are for AB5 and the some oftentimes misunderstandings about 2257, you know, the new law that was sort of complementing AB5. So again, if there are any questions, and I am talking to Assemblymember Gonzalez quite often these days, given the fact that we're constantly being mixed up. But aside from that, is if there's anything that we need to bring to light to this, I mean, not to say that we're going to hand out exemptions, or, you know, the law's pretty clear. But if there are some things that we need to know about, because we are learning about this law every single day and how it deeply impacts every single one of you in your work, happy to hear about them. Unemployment assistance, again, happy to hear about it. I think, again, November is going to find new opportunities for us to relook and pivot on funding, and pivot on whether we get more unemployment assistance as well from the federal government. But overall, you know, I would just hope to continue supporting you as the chair of the pandemic committee, but also as your senator. I've also been working on very important legislation on broadband for all. I had a bill, SB 1130, that looked at the California Services Fund. There's about $300 million in this fund, and it had been very restricted to large ISPs, large internet service providers, not really giving a lot of opportunity for local governments to apply, for nonprofits to apply. And this, I think, could potentially be an opportunity for the Arts Council, for the nonprofit partnerships to now apply, not only for the infrastructure for digital inclusion, but also for digital inclusion efforts. You know, if you have artists that need to get online, or if you need to do a digital inclusion assessment, you know, et cetera. And so I think we're going to be bringing that forward. We have a forum next week with former FCC chairman with the Obama administration, Tom Wheeler, where we'll be discussing what digital inclusion and what the digital divide looks like in various sectors, education, medicine, and health, et cetera. So we'd love for you to join, and we'll continue those efforts next year. But I'm an open book, so if there's any other questions or comments or ideas that you have, we're always happy to hear them, even outside of this forum. So thank you again, Griselda. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to all the participants. We really appreciate your time.
You are very welcome, and thank you for opening your office to a letter writing campaign. I think many of our organizations will take you up on the offer.
Yes.
Appreciate it. And thank you, Michelle, as well, and your team for hosting this today.
Thank you both. And any organizations out there that are interested in, gathering or doing some advocacy together, we'd be happy to help to coordinate that. And we've also worked with Arts Council on some of those issues, or we can set up calls. So please reach out to us. We're here to help with your advocacy in that area as well. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Griselda. Thank you, Senator. It's been wonderful. So, and we will share all of the questions that didn't get answered. Those will be shared with the senator and her team. And so, and then again, write your letters, continue to do advocacy for arts because they're so important to the community. So thank you all. And I hope everyone has a wonderful week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
You too.
Yeah.